Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sherry.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 66, a tour of the palace of the Grandmaster of the Knights of Rhodes. Now, Sherry and I are going to take you through the whole building. It was built on the highest spot in the old medieval city, which is pretty obvious from the pictures. It was built in the 14th century on the Acropolis of the old first Byzantine fort. And in 1481, it was badly damaged in an earthquake, and then in 1489, you had this massive Ottoman siege, which really devastated the whole area. But it was rebuilt and repaired completely by 1522. Unfortunately, after the fall to Suleiman the Magnificent in 1522, it began to decline. It was basically used as a prison, and then the buildings began to collapse bit by bit. Several earthquakes in the 1800s and a gunpowder explosion in 1856 completed its destruction. So it's completely rebuilt. We'll talk about the rebuilding a little bit later. So let's begin the tour of this grand palace. On our second day in Rhodes, Sherry and I plan to go to the Grand Palace and then go to the Acropolis. We've already shown you the Acropolis picture, so we're doing the first part of it. So we started off from this part of the city, and then we walked down the harbor and then up the Street of the Knights until we ended up at the Palace of the Grandmaster. And here you can see it a little bit better, how high it sits up. And although it's reconstructed, there's still quite a few pieces of it, such as the main gate and the defensive walls. But anyway, we get to the Street of Knights, and so we walk up the street, and each of these buildings is one of the houses of the Spanish Knights, the English Knights, the Knights of Provence, etc., and so on. They don't necessarily live here, but it is where they have their meetings and do social get-togethers. So we walk all the way up to this area here that crosses the little window, and then we continue going up. It's quite a long street till we reach this archway. Now, in this archway, it then goes off different directions. The one to the right side will then take us to the palace. Straight ahead, we continue to the fortifications. Off to the left, we'll end up going down into a shopping area. So ultimately, we end up right here looking at the entrance to the palace of the Grandmaster of the Knights of Rhodes. And this is one of the main features that survived all of the destruction over the years. This aerial picture will allow you to see a little bit more of just how large it is. Now, the entire building is 80 meters by 75 meters. And then when you go through the main door, here's the door entrance. You go in, you get your tickets. There's other things that you can do. They have tours that are set up. And when we went in, we noticed that there was a tour of the battlements. When we went to sign up, they said, well, they were sorry, but there was an EU conference there, and it was strictly for the EU members, so we didn't get to do that. So anyway, we walk out into the courtyard. Now, the courtyard itself is 50 meters by 40 meters. And all of these little niches at one time here on this ground floor area would have been storehouses, kitchens, stables, all of that. And you could actually have, in certain areas, there were 3 stories down below this where they stored grain and munitions and where the people of the city could come in and take refuge. They also had 8 grain silos that were underground, of which only 3 of them still survive, and they're capped to make them look like wells. So this spot right here is probably where one of those grain silo locations would have been located underground. And then you walk around and you see all these various statues. Now, when they rebuilt this in 1937, they used a lot of artwork from different parts of the Dodecanese Islands. Here we are looking back to where we came in. Now it's time to start going into different areas. All around the courtyard you have these walkways, and you'll find rooms that have all kinds of historical objects in them. And you'll also find the chapel. Now here is a picture of the front of the chapel of the Palace of the Grandmaster. It's very small. If you turn around to look at the back, you'll see that there's 2 works of art here. One of them is this great big St. Nicholas of Bari, which was done by Donatello. However, that is a copper reproduction. And then you have the Annunciation of Mary by Bontolone, which was actually done in 1940. So if you get closer to the Annunciation, they have the little holy water device in front of it, and then here's a beautiful picture of the Annunciation. If you travel all over Europe, you'll find annunciations all over the place. Some of them actually have the words that the angel spoke cut into marble statues, or even on paint, they'll have them raised out and in gold. Another one of the niches had a little museum on pottery from the area, and then I ran into one that had military stuff. So here's some of the smaller cannons that were used in the various sieges. And then here we have a stack of cannonballs that would have worked in these smaller guns. And then here's a closer shot of some of the smaller cannons. And the chains on the wall were used for galley slaves and work gangs. Well, it's time to go up to the top of the building and see the main floor. But let's talk about the Reconstruction first, because this area that we're headed is almost completely reconstructed. Now, it was in 1937 that the Italian governor of the Dodecanese area, Cesare de Vecchi, restored the palace, and he made it his office as well as his home. And it was finished in 1940. And some of the changes that he did, he changed the ground floor, he altered it. The buildings that were surrounding the palace were destroyed, which was really too bad because some of those were actually medieval. They added mezzanines, and you can see one of the entrances to that mezzanine right here, kind of in the middle of the staircase. And then an entire new upper story was built over the entire building, and that is where all of the rooms and all of the other art is located. Now today, you see the grandeur and wealth of the Italian period of Rhodes, and it's basically a museum with exhibits that were brought from all over the region. The upstairs is decorated with late Greek and early Christian mosaic that were brought from the island of Kos. So most of the rooms that I'll be talking about are designated based upon the mosaic in the floor, which is quite frankly exactly what happened if you were in a Roman villa. So you're looking up the steps, heading up to the top. So we stopped at the first mezzanine to look down. And then we're looking back up the other direction. Then once you get to the top, you get a nice view. Here's the back wall of the palace, and then you can see the fortification wall off in the distance. And this is the way you go out through the Amboise Gate, actually. And then here's looking off to another direction, and you see some of the churches that are scattered around. I know we started this, and there wasn't a map in the very first couple of slides, just pictures. Well, here's your map. Now the upper floor, where all the rooms are located, have, all these different topics. So if you look at the one side, you see a trophy chamber, the Lacoon Chamber, Meduza, the dolphin. They all have these various motifs. There wasn't a handout. So when Sherry and I came up here, we came up this way, right through here, up the grand staircase. According to our pictures, what we did was we went this direction. We went all through these different rooms. We did miss a couple of them and went all the way around the other direction. Now, most of the guidebooks, as you can see, start here because there is another flight of steps. I believe this comes up from outside in the courtyard. So we're going to follow what Sherry and I ended up doing. We did not do this section here, but we're going to start with number 6, which is the Chamber of the Colonnades. And then we will go around showing you the main art that's on the inside. The first room we entered, once we got to the top, was the Chamber with the Colonnade. So there's the entry doors that we came in, and you see mosaics all over the floor. And here's the picture showing the two colonnades with their Theodosian capitals. And it divides this room into 3 areas. And they believe this would have been a room where they would have had their main meetings of the knights. And in the floor you have the little dolphin mosaics and all sorts of different mosaics in this very, very, very large room. Here's the fireplace in the corner where you exit. And then they have 2 of these life-size angels that are actually candle holders. And they're from the 1600s. So we leave the colonnade room and we enter into what is known as the Tiger Chamber. The tiger is in that area that it's surrounded by the protection. And here's the whole room, which shows the choir seats that are in here. Now I want you to look at the picture that we took of the tiger. It's not quite as bright as you usually see when you get a postcard or when you see them in books. It's because the lighting in the room varies so much, and when they take professional pictures, they have light on them. So here, this is what we saw, and it's nice. But this is what the postcard looks like. And you can see how bright it is, and that is very typical. You may go in the museums and the lighting isn't the best for taking pictures. You come back another time of the day and it turns out to be a little better shot. So we usually, when we take pictures of art, if it is not bright, we almost always buy a postcard so we can compensate if we're using it in our classes. Leaving the Tiger Chamber, we go right next door to see Meduza. This is the Meduza Chamber. And here's the entire Meduza mosaic. Now this is late Hellenistic from the Rhodian period, so it's quite nice. Yet the postcard is a little bit brighter. Here is the head of Meduza, but look at the beautiful colors of this particular mosaic. Saying goodbye to Meduza, we walk next door into this room that doesn't appear to have anything spectacular in it till you turn and look at the wall. This is the Lacoon Chamber, and it's dominated by this plaster cast of a sculptural group from the 1st century BC of Lacoon, story of the priest who tried to warn everybody about the Trojan horse. Well, the original is in Rome in the Vatican. Its copy is here for a simple reason that it was done by 3 Rhodian sculptors, Augustodorus, Athenodorus, and Polydorus. Now, if you go to the Vatican, where Sherry and I have been, here's how they portray it. But there's the Lacoon, and here's a nice closer view of it. And then here's the fireplace in the room that most people don't pay much attention to. Well, leaving the Lacoon room, we go into a larger room, which really kind of focuses on a variety of objects. But the one object that I was there to see was this. This is known as the Trophy Chamber. And the picture you see here is of a trophy from the Mithridatic Wars. It's a marble trophy from the 1st century BC. It actually comes from the cemetery of ancient Rhodes. Presently stands on a Hellenistic altarpiece with Dionysius represented in the relief. But it is not uncommon to have trophies, and sometimes they're just a column. For example, in a major battle where you have a major success and it changes the war, at the spot where the battle turns, where the people started to run away, they will put a column or something, and it's referred to as a trophy. If you go to Marathon, there's a spot where there's the Marathon trophy, where during the battle the Persian army began to retreat from this location, and it's very common. After the trophy room, we enter the 2nd chamber with choir stall. And the mosaic on the floor that you find here, again, late Hellenistic, is known as the pine cone. So you can see it pretty good color here, and then here we are in another section. So it's a very small room. Now we enter the 1st chamber with choir stalls. You go, well, why didn't you enter here first? That's because you go into the second one first and then into the first one because we're going backwards. Now the floor is decorated again in late Hellenistic mosaics with geometrical shapes, and you have these wood-carved choir stalls. But they're from the 1500s or the 16th century. And then you see this magnificent window setting at the very end of it. Now we are entering one of the most beautiful of the rooms in the palace. It's known as the Chamber of the 9 Muses, and it's named after the mosaic from the late Hellenistic period that's directly in the middle of the floor. And here is a close view of the 9 Muses. And then if you look up the beautiful columns and the ceiling area, and then we have a picture here of a nice vase in one of the corners. And here's a close-up view of this incredible vase. And then here we are looking down the other direction in the room as we get ready to exit. Now, leaving the Chamber of the Muses, here's Sherry walking down this corridor. Now, this corridor has a significant amount of mosaics in it. One of them shows the gladiator fighting a tiger. So here it is on the floor with our picture. And of course, here it is, the postcard version. And in this one, you see that we have this yellow light on the floor, which gives it a nice yellow tone. You can see it better. This is Poseidon fighting the polybots. And then here's a picture of it with, of course, the postcard version. Now, this is the Chamber of the Fishing Eros. So you see the whole room. You see the nice tapestry on the wall. And then here is the beautiful picture of the fish, which you see Eros doing his best to catch some fish. And then you have all the birds and other things around it. Just a beautiful mosaic. Staying with the fish theme, we come to the Chamber with the Dolphins. This was decorated a mosaic floor from the island of Kos. Again, a late Hellenistic period mosaic depicting a fish encircled by dolphins. And here's a close-up view of that fish. Now we come to the Lantern Chamber, which is pretty obvious with the beautiful lantern on the wall there. But the mosaic is an early Christian mosaic floor from the 5th 5th century, and it also comes from Kos. And the lantern is held in a black wooden hand on the wall of the chamber. So that sometimes you don't notice the holding it up. And here's a close-up view of this beautiful Christian mosaic on the floor. Our next room is kind of a mix of things. For example, the wall decorations and paintings with mirrors are from the 1800s. The furniture is from the 1800s. But of course, the floor is, again, late Hellenistic. It's called the chamber with the seahorse and the nymph. So here's the full room. Here we are coming in the one side. The back side you see the fireplace, and it really is like you're walking out of Versailles. And then here is the sea nymph. Believe it or not, we couldn't find a postcard of. So that is the chamber with the seahorse and the nymph. Yes, this is our last room. It's called the Thrasus Chamber. It's a representation of the object you see in the middle of the floor, which is a symbol of the god of Dionysius and of his worship. It also has a very beautiful feature that neither Sherry or I got a picture of. That is the ceiling. It is an impressive Murano glass chandelier. But it also, as you can see in the background, has this wonderful choir stalls as well. And here's a little look at it from another side of the Thrasus. Well, that completed our circuit of the rooms. That wasn't all the rooms. If you look at the chart, there were a lot of them that weren't numbered. But here we have a view where you can see the Aegean Sea out one section of the windows, and across the hall we were able to get a nice little view of the courtyard. And I would assume that's the flight of stairs that you go up that gets into the trophy room where they started the walk. Whereas we went on the inside right here, and here we are getting ready to start walking down those steps, and then we leave the palace of the Grandmaster, and we're heading out the Amboise Gate, and we're going to head to ancient Rhodes. Sherry and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.